Hi everyone, welcome to the Intro to Christianity course, Theology 103. My name is Mrs. Julie Van Cat, and I have been teaching for College of St. Mary's for the past 6 or 7 years. I mostly teach online, but every once in a while I teach in person. I teach another course called Women in the Christian Tradition. I am married. I'll be married 25 years this summer. And I have 5 kids. My oldest is 24, my youngest is 12, and the first 4 were girls, and then I finally had a son. I teach full-time at Mercy High School. I've been teaching high school for about 25 years. And again, I've been teaching for College of St. Mary's for the past 6 or 7 years. I'm thrilled to be teaching all of you this semester, and I look forward to getting to know some of you. And please know that you can always contact me. The best way to contact me is through my mercyhigh.org email address. But if you contact me through Canvas or CSM, I will also respond to you. I'll try to respond within 24 hours of your emails. The course that you're taking is Theology 103, and it will be mostly a church history course, and you'll be learning a lot about the origins of Christianity. A few things that I want you to know about the class. First of all, there's a schedule that's in the syllabi, and it starts about midway through, and it looks like this at the bottom. And of course, there's several pages of the schedule. This is a day-by-day schedule, and I want you to pay close attention to it and honor the due dates that are listed there. All assignments are due by 10 p.m. on the day that they're assigned. For homework, you will once a week watch a video like this one. You will complete the reading that's assigned to you. You will participate in a reading task or a discussion. I'll explain the difference between the two in a moment. You'll take a quiz or a test by Friday at 10 p.m. The first 2 weeks are quizzes. The third week is a midterm. Then the next 2 weeks are quizzes, and then the final. The final test will be over the second half of the class, everything since the midterm, and not over the whole 6 weeks of class. So you will, as you're reading, hopefully take advantage of the reading packet or the notes packet that I provide. It's basically a list of people and terms and concepts, but it hopefully provides you a place to take notes as you're reading, and I think those notes will be really helpful when you take the quizzes and the tests. As far as the quizzes go, you'll have somewhere between 25 and 30 questions, and you'll have about 45 minutes to answer. And as far as the tests go, you will have about 90 minutes to answer, and it will be 50 to 60 questions. Again, the midterm will be over the first 3 weeks of the class, and the final will be over the last 3 weeks of the class. Each week you'll participate in reading tasks and discussions, sometimes just 1 a week, sometimes 2. A reading task usually asks you to take some of what you read and research further into the information, while a discussion asks you to react to something and to respond to other people in your class. With the discussions, you'll be able to read what other people are writing. Make sure that all of your posts are original, meaning that you wrote them yourselves, and if you direct quote or paraphrase someone else, that you have a little works cited at the bottom of your post. It is never okay to cut and paste from some other source and make that your post. That will give you a 0, and I will contact College of St. Mary's if that happens. You will write a paper for the class, a research paper. You're going to write 1 paper. It's due on July 16th. Prior to the paper, you will turn in an outline on July 2nd and a works cited on July 10th for that paper. The topic of the paper will be for you to pick a person or event and make the case for that person or event to be the most important or most significant or most influential person or event in church history. You cannot write about Jesus, although of course Jesus would be the most important. But you can pick any other person, and mostly I'd like you to pick people that are discussed in the reading. A simple look at the notes packets will give you some ideas of people or events. As far as the first week of class, so this video will serve as both kind of an introduction to how the class works and also the first week. So primarily the first week you're going to be reading some introductory stuff about religion in general, and then you'll be reading some information that hopefully helps you understand better the Old Testament or the Hebrew Scriptures, as sometimes they're called. So in the intro part, something to note will be the 7 dimensions of religion. I think this is a good intro to all religions, but primarily when you read about Christianity, you'll see these 7 dimensions represented. Also, it talks about some main kind of themes in the Old Testament. So anthropology and soteriology are 2 of the focuses of the book. Anthropology is the study of man, and so it will talk about how man reacted to religion. And soteriology, sorry, I'm stumbling over that word, but this is the study of salvation. So what have we believed about how we're saved or how we get to go to heaven, and how has that changed and evolved? As you're reading about the Old Testament or the Hebrew Scriptures, just a little bit about how it's organized. If you're looking at a Catholic Bible, you'll see that there's 46 books in the Old Testament, and if you're looking at any other Christian Bible, then there's only 39. We have some extra books in the Catholic Bible. These books are sometimes called the apocryphal books. The Old Testament is organized by genre or type of writing, and so the first 5 books are the books of the law, and then are the historical books, and then the writings, and then the prophets. And so it's not a fair assumption to think of the first book in the Bible as the first book that was written. It's also not accurate when you're talking about the Bible to assume that it was all written by the same person. In fact, almost every book was written by someone different. So really, the Bible is a lot like walking into a library where you see kind of books according to their genre, and then all by different authors, but with sort of the same goal in mind, to help us understand God and what God wants us to know about God, and to understand the roots of the faith. So as you read the first 5 chapters, you're going to read about a covenant that was forged between human beings and someone named Yahweh. And some of the first people that forged this covenant, first was Abraham. And Abraham is very important to both Judaism, Christianity, also Islam. He's the founding father of all 3 of those religions. Abraham was the first to forge a covenant with Yahweh, and this covenant is a loving agreement. On our part of the agreement, we're to follow the commandments of God and to be good caretakers of the earth and to try to do the right thing. Meanwhile, God's job will be to take care of us and protect us. And there's kind of a theme in the Old Testament that when you obey God, good things happen to you, and when you disobey God, bad things happen to you. We don't really see it the same way today, but they definitely saw that in the Old Testament. So, as an example, there's a book called Job, and in this book, all these horrible things happen to this man Job. And his friends and himself, they all kind of assume it's because of some sin that Job committed, and Job himself doesn't even know what sin he committed, but he assumes that he did something that didn't please God, which, of course, today we understand that this is all a great mystery, and we can't fully comprehend why bad things happen, but that it's not punishment from God anymore, or we don't see it that way. Abraham had several sons. Actually, he had 2 sons, Ishmael and Isaac. Ishmael was the son of one of his maidservants and also the founding father of Islam. But Isaac becomes the father of Jacob and Esau, and Jacob the father of 12 sons. Jacob eventually changes his name to Israel, and the 12 sons are the fathers of the 12 tribes of Israel, which you'll read about. Sorry, my dog is barking at me. Penny, stop it. Come here. Sorry, this is my dog, Penny. Anyway, so also you'll read about Moses, and Moses is really important in the story of of Judaism, and also to Christianity. But if you were a Jewish person, you would point to the story of Moses as the perfect example of how God always takes care of God's people. And so Moses and his family, his relatives are enslaved. Moses himself was raised in the Pharaoh's palace. There's a story that you'll read about that explains that. This is a good time for me to also insert, if you aren't sure about some of these stories and the book doesn't give you enough information, the Bible is also a great resource to understand more. Anyway, Moses was raised in the Pharaoh's home, but he knows he's a Hebrew and his people are enslaved. So he finally kind of loses respect for the Egyptians and kills an Egyptian, has to flee into the desert. God speaks to him through a burning bush and tells him to go back and demand that the Pharaoh let his people go. He does that, and there are 10 plagues where the Pharaoh keeps saying no. And so God strikes all these plagues on Egypt, the last of which is the death of the firstborn, saying that all firstborn boys will be killed. And to spare the Hebrew people, he tells Moses to tell them to take blood, lamb's blood, and put it over their door. And then the angel of death will know to pass over their houses. And so they're all spared, whereas the Egyptian firstborn sons all die. And so the Pharaoh finally breaks and lets the Hebrew people leave Egypt and frees them from the bondage of slavery. And they flee into the desert, and then the Pharaoh changes his mind, so they start chasing them through the desert, the Egyptians do. They get to the Red Sea, and Moses raises a staff and parts the waters of the Red Sea, and the Hebrew people are able to get through, and the Egyptians follow them, and then they're swallowed up by all this water. That's a huge story in the Old Testament, and it's really significant because the Hebrew people, according to the Bible, were enslaved for 400 years. Their plight seemed totally, like there was no hope in sight. And then God finally saved them. And so it kind of sends the message that God will save you. You just have to be patient. And you have to wait for God to do things in God's time. You'll also read about the prophets. The prophets were people who kind of spread the message about God to people who were unbelievers or non-believers. You'll read about David, who, according to the Jewish people, was the greatest of all the Jewish kings, and his son Solomon. When you read about Judaism, you'll understand that 3 important things to them are the temple, the Torah, and the Messiah. The temple was where they went for prayer. The Torah was their holy book, where they believe Moses wrote down exactly what God dictated, although we don't really see it that way today. And then finally, the Messiah. And this idea of the Messiah is very important for you to grasp. They believed that someone like King David, who was a great military leader and a great people person and really seemed faithful to God, that someone like King David would come and restore them to a position of power and wealth and affluence. And literally they believed that he would be a king and they would take over the important position in the kingdom. But of course the kingdom that eventually Jesus talks about is more about heaven. But when people were first imagining this Messiah, they thought this would be an earthly king. And so they were awaiting this Messiah, just like the people in Egypt waited for someone to save them. And this is where Jesus enters the story. And as Christians, we believe Jesus is the Messiah. And so again, the first week you're focusing mostly on trying to understand Judaism and that Old Testament history. I will do a video like this that will be posted near the beginning of each week that will give you kind of an overview for the week and also go into more detail about the homework. The syllabus also goes into detail about the paper in particular and gives you some more things to think about when you're writing that paper. Again, if you have any questions, please email me. I am going to be out of the country from June 4th through June 11th. So if you're seeing this on June 4th and you do want to send some questions, I won't be able to reply to those until I get back on June 11th or 12th. Class doesn't actually start till June 18th. Okay, good luck to everyone, and again, communicate with me if you have any questions. See you later.